Hey, everybody, welcome back to Deep Dive Movie Reviews. I'm Steve Hackman, and along with my friend James, we're going to be unpacking some of your favorite movies. Before we begin, though, if you love Deep Dive Movie Reviews, if you love long conversations about the movies you love, remember to subscribe to the channel, ding that bell so you never, ever miss a video. And also, just as a reminder, this is spoiler heavy. You have been warned. We are going to talk about every aspect of today's movie, which is going to be what, James?
This week we're talking about Miguel Sapochnik's Finch, which is a post-apocalyptic sci-fi drama starring Tom Hanks, Caleb Landry Jones, and a dog.
And a dog.
That's right.
This
And that's it. You know, it's a tiny cast.
It. Yeah. James, I as a full disclosure, I did see, I like to come into these things not really knowing your thoughts, so we can kind of, and have a little banter on it, obviously, but I did see your review on RTHK last Friday, and I intentionally, when I watched the movie after I'd seen your review, and I thought, I'm going to really set myself apart from James, because so far you and I haven't really had a I loved it, I hated it movie review yet. I'm sure that day's coming, hasn't come yet. So I thought, I'm really going to try to, I know your thoughts on this film.
To prove me wrong.
I'm going to go in a completely different direction. And I came out the end going, shoot, I think I pretty much agree with James on just about everything with this. So what are your initial thoughts, James?
Okay, well, so just to set the movie up, this is exclusively available on Apple TV Plus, and when I first saw it pop up, I thought, okay, I know what that movie is. Yeah. You know, it's Tom Hanks in the wilderness with a robot and a dog, you know, and it's Castaway. It's like Castaway meets Mad Max is what I basically surmised from the poster, and I thought, okay, I know what that movie is. I don't need to rush to go and see it. Or to
with a little of Cormac McCarthy's The Road thrown in there too.
Right, and this was my anticipation of what I thought it was probably going to be like. But then, you know, as luck would have it, it was a slow movie week, and so you know, I think it was even that first weekend when it dropped, I found myself sitting down and watching it. Watched it with my wife at home, and was pleasantly surprised by how engaged I was in the story. You know, at the end of the day, I mean, just to lay my cards on the table, it was essentially the movie that I thought it was going to be. But I think what pleasantly surprised me about it was how it operated within those cliches and within those tropes, and how it managed to sort of eke out, you know, some real sort of heart, some emotion, some relationships. I thought the robot Jeff, played via motion capture by Caleb Landry Jones, was particularly well done. And I thought at the same time it managed to quite deftly avoid some of the potholes that a lot of these movies do sort of fall into.
Sure. Yeah, that was my initial thought as well, because when I watched this, I thought, okay, I'm watching The Road. And the Viggo Mortensen character is now Tom Hanks. And instead of it being a little boy in a post-apocalyptic world and we have to head west, I have a robot and a dog. And that's the emotional ties that are here.
Yeah, no, it's exactly that. You know, it's a bit of The Road. It's not as bleak as The Road. And I think that was sort of the overwhelming relief I felt.
No.
You know, they're not constantly under threat. Yeah. From scavengers or zombies or you know, whomever else might be out there in the wilderness. In fact, there's nobody else out there in the wilderness, and that was the big surprise for me, because I was like, oh, at some point they're going to meet some sort of feral gang who are either gonna team up with, or who are just going to rip them off completely. And we didn't have that.
No. What we got was we did see unfaced. We didn't see the faces of people, or if we did, it was kind of alluded to in flashbacks. So we never had that trope that you talk about of the feral gangs. But they definitely were going for a family feel in this movie, rather than that dark road Cormac McCarthy feel. This is Tom Hanks. This is America's actor, and this was definitely even though the themes could have gotten very dark, this was I would say I'm sure it doesn't have a rating, but I would give this a PG, not even a
Mm-hmm.
PG-13.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail right on the head there. I think it's a Tom Hanks movie,
Yeah.
and I think that kind of, I mean, that's not a criticism in any way, but I think it gives you some kind of idea about the tone of this movie. Like you said, this is going to be a family-friendly movie. This is going to be earnest. This is going to be wholesome to some degree.
This initially made me feel of, I'm old enough to be of or I'm of the age where we used to have the ABC or CBS movie of the week, long before VHS back in the 70s. There would be these made for TV movies. They would have smaller budgets, and they would bring in either actors that were maybe on the downslide a bit, or
Right.
maybe a big TV actor. Back in the days when there was a huge difference between a TV actor and a movie actor, you know. And so you'd get maybe a big name actor who'd been a breakout in some TV series, and now we're gonna utilize him for the Sunday night movie of the week. And they were always, like I said, little slightly lower budgets and very convention based movies. It was something that wouldn't make it to the cinema or to the big screen. And that's what this movie initially felt like to me. This is the Sunday movie of the week, because I've seen this trope so many times, these conventions so many times. The thing that sets it apart, though, for me, was Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks doing this. Just about any other actor doing this, for me, would have not been able to pull off the emotional attachment. I mean, I'm sure we'll get into it, but the whole scene where Tom Hanks, for the first time, is able to come out into the sun just before he's going to die. Spoiler. And I just thought, for that moment, I just love watching Tom Hanks do this. I wouldn't want to really watch anybody else do this, but Tom Hanks doing this really works for me.
Right. No, absolutely. No, it's interesting you talk about these movies of the week, because that's a very American thing. You know, I grew up in England, and we don't have those, but I've heard that expression many, many, many times over the years, and it's my interpretation of that is it's kind of like a wholesome, family-friendly, almost like a message movie or a parable to some degree, that, you know, it's promoting sort of traditional family values and that kind of thing, and you'll come away from it unscathed and perhaps sort of encouraged or reminded of the goodness that there is in the world.
Yes,
That was my understanding of it.
As a tangent on that, when it wouldn't be a first run movie, what they would do is they would often take maybe a big blockbuster at the movies, but they would be heavily edited for the family audience. So I remember the first time I saw John Boorman's Deliverance was on TV, one of these movies of the week. And I thought, oh, yeah, no, that. And then years later, when I saw Deliverance, like in its real theatrical version, I went, oh, that's not the movie I saw on the set.
This wasn't about four guys going camping and having a great weekend.
No, it wasn't at all. Wow, somebody did a bait and switch on me.
Yeah, I imagine that movie must have been about 20 minutes long after they had the shears out for it. But I think you say a lot when you say, like, you know, you see Tom Hanks in a movie and you kind of know it is a stamp. You know you're going to get a kind of a wholesome, earnest experience to one degree or another, but also it is a stamp of quality, and I think that is ultimately what drew me, what convinced me to get on with it and watch it.
Right.
Is that, you know, I know what that kind of movie is going to be, but the fact is, why is Tom Hanks making a movie like that? I mean, he knows what kind of movie that is. It's not the kind of thing he normally does. He very rarely does anything sort of sci-fi related. So it must be good. It was my simple assumption going in. You know, there must be something in here that has attracted him to the material. You know, he doesn't do stuff just for a paycheck. He doesn't have to. He does like one movie a year, and it's gonna be of a certain quality. And it's true. It is. You know, it is treading a lot of familiar territory, both for him. You know, it is Castaway essentially. You know, for a lot of the movie is spent on his own. You know, tinkering with various bits and pieces, putting together, assembling this robot for the first act of the movie is really, you know, him experimenting with this robot. And so you've got it reminded me a bit of, and quite intentionally, it reminded me a bit of Silent Running, the Bruce Dern movie.
Bruce Dern, yeah.
And actually, I don't know if you picked up, but the little drone robot thing he has at the beginning,
Dewey,
is called Dewey. And the three robots in Silent Running are Huey, Dewey, and Louie. That is not that's not a coincidence. That's very clearly referencing that movie, which also had sort of an ecological theme, overriding ecological theme, and is about a guy on his own, sort of struggling to survive for very modest reasons. In Silent Running, he's looking after this sort of space. What's it called? It's a greenhouse. It's a greenhouse space in space, right? Wow.
An ark. It wasn't a space ark, like an ark for human civilization.
It wasn't for people though. It was just for kind of flora and fauna,
right?
And he's told to destroy it. The project is abandoned, and he's told to destroy it. And in the end, he can't. He can't bring himself to destroy it, and so he just sort of abandons everybody else. I think he ends up having to kill somebody in order to protect it, and then just floats off into space, in his like geodome or whatever. And he's going to live as long as he lives. And there was an element to that here where his goals are not to save the world, not to cure a disease, not to rebuild essentially, but purely because he has a dog, and he knows that he's going to die before the dog does, and he needs somebody to look after the dog when he's gone.
It's funny how, just drawing the comparison with Bruce Dern, it just hit me, a very similar type of actor too, because neither Tom Hanks or Bruce Dern are the conventional movie stars in like a Tom Cruise or a Brad Pitt. They're the James Stewart type actor, and that works so well with this kind of man-facing nature. This is every man. This is the everyday guy, and that's what kind of and suddenly we can, as the viewer, we're transported into those situations because we could be that guy. That guy's not superhuman or super great looking or martial artist. He can't defy gravity with kicks. He's a dying middle-aged man who's had too much radiation poisoning, and there's that emotional connection. I found myself more emotionally connected into this movie than I thought I would be because of Tom Hanks, because I wanted to just kind of kept saying, I've seen this before, but Tom Hanks makes it fresh.
Yeah, exactly that. He is that ever relatable everyman you can project upon so easily, because he's warts and all. His flaws are right out there in front of him, and he doesn't really have any skill sets that you or I don't have.
Right.
He's not really any better than us, or more accomplished, or smarter, or stronger, or anything, like as you said. I think the other great addition to the story is how they chose to perform the part of Jeff, the robot. Because you could have gone in a number of different directions from that. Essentially, it is a fully working, anatomically sort of correct, anthropomorphic robot that is supposed to sort of essentially do, and it's a learning processor and all the rest of it, of course. And he's essentially there to sort of walk the dog and feed the dog, and that's about it, really. So he could have made something very, very simplistic, but he chooses. And by extension, the filmmakers choose, and Caleb Landry Jones in his performance choose to make him very sort of childlike, and very physically emotive. He slouches and slumps and is clumsy, in all of these ways, and it's a surprisingly sort of physically expressive performance that you wouldn't really expect from a robot. And I thought that. It was brave, because that could have just been weird and gone very wrong very, very easily. But I felt that it worked perfectly, and it was like sort of raising a child at high speed, you know, and dealing with sort of this sort of sponge of knowledge and violent mood swings and the sort of physical sort of growth as it would be for the child, but just development with the robot. It's such a sort of expedited rate. And I thought it was handled really well, and for me that was sort of, I think, the key to what made this film sort of better than I was expecting.
The Jeff, the robot, really comes across many times like a teenager. And as somebody who's had teenagers,
Right.
there's those frustrations that Tom Hanks has with Jeff that I think every parent that's had teenagers has had that experience of, I need you to grow up. I can't have you can't act like this anymore. I need you to be more responsible. I need you to do the way he was engaging with Jeff was like somebody who's wrestling with puberty. Jeff is uncomfortable in his own skin, even though he's a robot. He's not sure of things. He's easily, if Tom Hanks loses his temper with him, he quickly cowers down and can almost be a little pouty. He can go pout in the corner a little bit. Is it me or my imagination, James, or was his voice maturing? Was Jeff's voice maturing over the course of that movie too?
Quite possibly. I can't say that I did notice that, but it's entirely possible because there was definitely some kind of filter.
Yes.
It wasn't purely the actor's voice that you heard.
Right. I just felt it was less of a filter at the end. It was becoming more human-like at the end. I'm thinking, is that in my imagination? I thought I got to ask James that. Is he picking up the same thing?
I didn't notice that, but I'm gonna say that you're right, and because that fits.
Yeah.
And I think it's the kind of thing that they would have done. I mean, I thought it's a very bold move for Caleb Landry Jones. I mean, yeah, he's not like such a big star or anything, but he's come up through the ranks as one of the very sort of dependable and interesting young character actor. I think people, if they can't put a face to him, he's the brother of the girlfriend in Get Out. He's in he tends to be a creepy guy.
Right.
He's in 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. He's the guy who gets thrown through the window and ends up in a hospital.
Yes.
He's in a great film by Brandon Cronenberg called Antiviral, which is a really weird
I'm not familiar with that one.
Sci-fi movie from about a decade ago, which is worth checking out. So he tends to play these really kind of oddball outsider characters, and this is not that at all. Certainly in the personality of the character. Yeah. It's a far more benevolent character. It's a far more lovable character.
Well,
in a way.
You said it earlier. He's you anthropomorphize into this robot. I mean, he is human for all intents and purposes, other than the appearance of the robot. You definitely get an emotional attachment to this robot.
For sure. And it has to be said that I think the CGI work is seamless. It's so realistic. It's so well done. I never for a moment did I doubt that I was actually watching a robot.
Yeah.
Move around, and I think that's that's just how far we've come these days. It is pretty impressive. And then I suppose the other character we have to talk about is the dog. Who doesn't get a name until about halfway through the film.
No,
he's just called Dog for the first half, and he was great. I don't know whether they used one dog or more than one dog for that, but it was a real dog as opposed to CGI, and it was great, and it mattered a lot that the dog performance was as good as it was as well. He is a real character. At the end of the day, all the stakes in the movie and in the drama hang on his well-being and whether he is worth the sacrifices or the effort that Tom Hanks is making in order to make sure he's going to be okay after he dies.
Well, that's interesting, and to raise that point, James, because until halfway through the movie, the whole I'm doing this all to protect the dog after I die. Yes, I can kind of see where it makes sense, but I just thought, they're really having to scrape the bottom of the barrel for a general motive here, because I mean I struggled always with the first movie, John Wick. Like, you're going to go kill 100 people because somebody killed your dog. Like, I just couldn't. That equation doesn't work for me. But having said that, when he tells the story to Jeff of how the dog comes into his life, that was an incredible story. And so Tom Hanks is wrestling with inner demons here. And the salvation of that dog is like a redemption for the choice that he made, the cowardly choice, his refusal to stand up and defend that mother and child, to just hide away and let everybody die. That is something that's obviously keeping him up at night and becomes his motive. And up until he tells that story, the whole "I'm doing this so the dog can live after I'm gone" thing didn't really work for me. And then boom, it did.
Okay. Yeah, it's like the last hanging thread of his own humanity is represented by that dog. I mean, to be perfectly honest, as a many-time dog owner and an all-time dog lover, that was perfectly adequate a motivation as far as I was concerned. That was his one final relationship. His one remaining family member, if you like. But then it certainly added a layer to it, and I think it was a justifiable layer to it when it is revealed that this dog has become a sort of a totem for his own fear, cowardice, grief. It's representative of every bad decision he's ever made, or every regret he's ever had, or everything like that. In the same way, it must be pointed out that the dog in John Wick isn't just a dog. It's the gift given to him by his wife, on her deathbed. Just for the record, because I love that movie too.
Lest you think it's just a dog.
Yes, no. But it is a very, very cute dog.
Yeah.
As is this little guy here. But yeah, I think it does matter that the dog was played well and performed well and could do as much as it could. And it was not like some superhuman dog, but it is at the same time one of these trained dogs that because he spends all day talking to it. It is his only company, and the dog does seem receptive but understands the plight and the way that the dog portrays its initial skepticism of Jeff and jealousy of Jeff, and is slowly, over the course of the entire film, won over.
Right.
The film is as much about Jeff winning the trust of the dog as it is about Finch, Tom Hanks's character, succeeding in his efforts to create a responsible dog owner out of scrap metal. And that's, I think, at the end of the day, what I appreciated about the film is that the stakes are so small. They represent such grand things. Yeah. They represent, the plight of humanity, if you like. But it's done on such an intimate level, in such an everyday way, such a relatable way, that it really won me over. And I was like, okay, yeah, this is how you tell like a human story. It doesn't need to be these bold proclamations or lectures of anything. It can simply be this tale of one man and his dog.
A man and his dog. Let me ask you a question. I was thinking while I was watching, it seems like in post-apocalyptic movies, there's always this desire to go west. Stephen King's The Stand. The good guys have to go west to Boulder. The bad guys have to go west to Las Vegas. In Cormac McCarthy's The Road, we've got to go west to hit the ocean. In obviously in this, we've got to go west. And I think there's a couple other examples, if I dug, that they're always heading west. We always get the American story. Is there a comparable post-apocalyptic UK movie where somebody in Bristol has to make it north to Scotland? Like we've got to go north because that's where civilization is,
You know what? Yes, I think there is. I mean, the one that's immediately leaping to mind is 28 Days Later. Oh. And I think it is about going north, because north is away from the cities. It's away
London,
from the mass population. You've got north of England, Lake District, Yorkshire, and then you've got Scotland and the Highlands, and obviously high ground is supposed to be safe, although obviously it's colder there. I think the thing about going west, obviously it's a very unique, it's the story of the birth of the USA, really, or the development of the USA is going west, and there's something about that west coast that is
manifest destiny,
right?
Yeah.
And the west coast is warmer climate, and it's supposed to be far more desirable than the grim, murky East Coast. And so I suppose in the UK, it probably is heading north, just getting out of the cities, just getting away from civilization, back to your roots, back to simplicity, back to something more primal. But there aren't that many British post-apocalyptic movies. There's another one called Doomsday, which is quite funny because there's been some kind of, I think it is zombie outbreak or something, but they've resorted in the aftermath to a kind of medieval existence.
Okay.
And because obviously in Britain we've got lots of castles and things, and so they've all kind of gone back and they're living in these castles again and acting like they're, you know, lords and dukes and earls and what have you. And it's funny because the castles very deliberately have still got the you know, please hold the handrail sign, and
Right.
do not drop your trash here or your litter, as it would say in England. You know, while for the rest of it, they're acting as if it's like the 1400s and they're in their a high castle. But I thought that was like a very amusing touch of that movie. But I think because it's a small isolated island, and we don't get to stage such big epic
Right.
post-apocalyptic movies quite so often
On the grand scale.
Mm.
Looking at direction, cinematography, production, Miguel Sapochnik, what do you think he brings to this story?
Well, looking at his sort of background, he's comes from TV, but big scale TV. He's directed a lot of Game of Thrones episodes and things like that. So
if you go far enough back, he started as a storyboard artist with and one of his first big projects was Train Spotting.
yes, I did notice that. I'd read that and then forgot it. So yeah, he's British, I guess, originally. Is he? Let's say yes.
Yeah, let's say yes.
Right, and that's directed by Danny Boyle, who directed 28 Days Later. So, you know, there's a natural
There's the network. Yeah.
a natural connection there. So I think primarily he brings a visual sensibility to it, which is what you want from this kind of movie. You need that seamless connectivity between what's real on set and obviously the CGI when you're working with, you know, CGI characters and what have you, and just the sense of wide open spaces, you know, and how to shoot them in a consistently interesting, sometimes oppressive way, you know, because the enemy here is the sun. At the end of the day, you know, there aren't, like as we said, there aren't sort of other people really anywhere, and there aren't animals anywhere or anything like that. The threat is the weather, or just the heat, and that's a very difficult thing to represent visually. And I think he does a fairly good job
when they finally and for viewers, the ozone layer is in patches, and so he's trying to get to a patch where the ozone is still there. And I love that scene, James, where he opens up the trailer door, the motorhome door, and he puts his hand out almost like a vampire, testing to see whether he's going to burn or not. And when he feels, and it's just such a lovely moment when he feels the sun on his skin for the first time in probably years, because he hasn't been able to enjoy going out in the sun. And when he steps out and you just see this euphoric, you know, almost, I think of Superman Returns, when he flies up into the atmosphere and he just looks at the sun, and it's like his whole body recharges with the heat. Right. And that's what I felt with Tom Hanks. It's like something that I've lost for so long. And I can, you know, this almost primal life-giving force I have a relationship with again. And that moment, I thought it was very, very well done.
Sure. And this is, I think there's a couple of things that work in this way. I mean, the sun and the heat is one, and the ocean is another one. You know, this idea that you know, water is the great life giver but can kill you just as easily, and the sun equally. That I think they make for fascinating sort of subject matters in storytelling. And here it's great because for most of the film, the sun is the most dangerous thing, and if you can't spend any time, not even a second or two. You know, there's that great sequence where Jeff first learns how to drive the RV and drives it away from like an old diner that they've found. Yeah. And so there's now a gap of like 50 feet, you know, in the hot beating sun, and the dog almost goes out at one point, and you know that the dog probably doesn't quite fully understand what the threat is, what the problem is, but would just get incinerated in a heartbeat. And there are moments like that where something that, you know, we don't think twice about. You know, we might put some sun cream on if we're going to go and lie in the on the
Right.
beach all afternoon, but that we don't think twice about can kill you in a second. But at the same time, that's the thing that we need in order to sustain ourselves. So it's in that way it's as primal as something like Jaws. You're out in the ocean and everything's great, but there's also stuff in there that's going to kill you.
Exactly. Exactly. And with the ozone depletion message, I love that this movie did have a passive environmental message,
Yeah.
but I never felt preached to. I'm very sensitive these days when I feel somebody's using the story to convey some kind of moral lesson to me.
Mm-hmm. Like in Eternals, maybe.
Yeah, in a ham-fisted way. Yeah. I don't mind a strong moral message. I don't mind a passive message, but it's that I'm getting up on a pedestal. I got all your attention now. I'm going to drive home a point, and
right.
That's never fun to watch.
No, and I think as I was saying about the sort of the family angle of it, it has a message and it is telling a big story, but it never steps outside of its very small and intimate surroundings in order to do so. It does talk about the importance, the reality of climate change, the vulnerability of the ozone layer, the desperate need to educate generations for the sake of our future, and it's not even our children's children. It's the young people right here who are right in front of us. They're the ones who are going to suffer for this. Mm-hmm. But it never steps beyond the boundaries of that single sort of family unit. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why it kind of works, because it's never talking down to you. Mm-hmm. It's never trying to articulate it in grander terms than, no, you need to learn so that one doesn't die. Yeah. And obviously it is a very very good message. Mm-hmm. We do need to act right now. Arguably it's too late already and everything is ruined. Yeah. But hope is your only hope.
What else I thought, and I don't know if this comes from the direction or obviously from the storyline of the producers, but there obviously was a conscious decision that we're not going to show the bad guys. We're not going to show the feral gang. We really don't have any other actors in this besides Tom Hanks, the dog, and Caleb Landry Jones playing. Did I say that right? Caleb Landry Jones?
You did.
Yes. You did. Playing Jeff. And other than the flashback with the girl and the mother, there was the quick flashback. But other than that, to me, something would have been lost if maybe Jeff gets captured by a feral gang, as you mentioned, and they have to hatch a rescue plan and they're interacting. Something would be diluted from this almost stage play that I'm watching with three actors, the dog, the robot, and Tom Hanks. And everything in their world becomes so much more important, because any outside challenge is nameless and faceless. The sun is nameless and faceless. The water's nameless and faceless. Even the people that are out to get them, you never see their faces. In fact, I thought it was a very good suspenseful scene when you see the lights in the rear view mirror getting closer. I don't know why I thought of Steven Spielberg's first movie, Duel, just being on that highway, and having where he's speeding up and he's using the elevations of the road to kind of try to hide themselves a little bit. I thought very well done. And you never see the faces of the bad guys behind the wheel, like trying to catch up with them. It's a menace that is unseen, and it made it even more suspenseful for me.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And you were saying that you weren't sure whose decision that was. They've been quite open about it. That was actually Miguel Sapochnik's decision. If I can read a quote to you,
please,
from him. He says, there was a whole section that ended up on the cutting room floor that was about Jeff finally coming into contact with human beings and how they were not what he expected, and certainly not what his father Finch had prepared him for. But when we got to post-production, we were in the edit, there was a point where I realized that I knew we had reached the end of the movie, but we still had more movie to tell. I tried as much as I could to see if we could accommodate it, but it was a bigger story than we had time to tell in the time that we had to tell it. At some point, we just had to make a choice. To me, I believe the notion of kill your darlings. I loved it. I really liked what we did. It had great actors in it. I had Samira Wiley. It had my wife. He cut his own wife out of the movie. It had my wife, Alexis Rabin. We had Skeet Ulrich. They had Laura Harrier in there as well from Spider-Man Homecoming. We had a load of good people in it. And but it wasn't the right ending for this chapter of this story, so we had to let it go.
Wow, that's a tough call to make right there. That's a tough.
that's going to be a difficult dinner after that decision.
Yeah, that's
an uncomfortable night at home. That one.
That's a hard one. That is a tough creative decision, but all the better for it, because I think now, having seen it, that's just the right decision to make.
Without a doubt. As I said right up front, it was one of the things that really made this film stand out from other sort of post-apocalyptic movies, is that there weren't any other people, and that even when there's a suggestion that there might be someone, you never saw their face. They were always a very abstract threat, because that's not what it's about,
In fact, when he gets to the bridge, the Golden Gate Bridge at the end, the faces we see are just pictures of people on there. And so, for me, at least, the message I got at the end was there's this message of hope, but nothing certain.
Well, yes, yeah, you see just this sort of attached to the fence is just all of these messages from loved ones, sort of saying, "Where are you?" or "We have left, we have gone here." Yeah. It promises nothing, but it gives the hope.
It gives the hope. Yeah,
that there may be a solution, that there may be a better life out there somewhere.
Well, James, drawing this to a close, what final thoughts and then a final score? We're going to give this out of motorhomes. How many motorhomes out of 5 are we going to give the Tom Hanks movie Finch?
Right. Final thoughts. Just how it knows what it is. It respects the genre in which it's working. But I really appreciated the restraint, the small scale. Even though the stakes couldn't be higher, it's the fate of the world. Just the small scale, the intimate nature, the way that they dealt with these problems in the most everyday and confined manner possible. I really appreciated that. But at the end of the day, yeah, it is a story that we've heard many, many times before, and that is always going to work against it. There are always going to be sort of better examples of this kind of story. So I'm going to give it a solid 3 motorhomes out of 5.
Fantastic, James. I don't think I have anything to add that I haven't said already, other than I think this is it's great watching Tom Hanks be Tom Hanks. Watch this movie with your family. It's got a great message, and I think it's very enjoyable. For what it does, I'm going to give it 4 motorhomes out of 5. I thought this was highly enjoyable, and I really recommend it. Go out and watch it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I'm probably being a bit mean.
It's good that we don't have the same score.
Yeah, well, I think so. But we're in the same ballpark. It's not 1 and 5. We have yet to still find a film that has polarized us.
We're gonna have to find that polarizing film, and I'm sure we're gonna do enough that there will be ones that come up. But
it'll happen. It'll happen. I can't wait for that. Actually, when we get into a proper heated debate about it.
Yeah. What are you, nuts? Are you
crazy?
How can you not see creative genius at work here?
Maybe Paw Patrol the movie that's where we need to go next.
Well, anyhow, that's our review. That's our deep dive review for the movie Finch, and we look forward to seeing you back here next week with whatever movie we end up decide on doing.
Absolutely, remains to be seen. See you next time.
See you.